clean. We're starting off clean. Okay, this is gonna be a nice video, no swearing. It's gonna be cool. It's gonna be chillax ASMR video. I've just been thinking a lot about Dead Rising for like the last 10 years or so. Yeah, and given the circumstances, I figure the best thing to do is to talk about it at length for no reason for way too long. So I'm gonna do that right now. I'm gonna start doing it now. I don't want to give undue credit, to the game because of my personal relationship to it, but I do believe that my personal relationship to it is a huge part of why I love it. So probably the first time I played it was like 13. How old is it now? 13 years? It was 2007 is when it came out, right? So it was like 13 years ago was the first time I played it. Way too young to be playing Dead Rising or any game like that, but for anyone that might recall, on the Xbox 360 it had a demo. This is when demos existed basically at all, so it was pretty tight when any game had a demo, because that basically meant you got to play a game for free, and that was like the coolest thing for 2006. So when you booted up the demo in 2006 Dead Rising, it is the game like locked you into Paradise Plaza, which is like technically the first area of the game, but it did a weird thing where for some reason the shutters are open to Entrance Plaza, so anytime you would walk into Entrance Plaza, it would play the Sniper family cutscene, and it would like trigger that boss battle, but it would just show you the cutscene and then the demo would end. So you like would just basically hang out. I think it gave you like 3 hours or something to hang out until it triggered the like 9 o'clock thing, I think it was, when the eyes go red, the zombies' eyes go red, and then it would kick you off. So you got like a decent amount of time to play, and it would give you like a weird assortment of weapons to mess with too. Anytime you would exit like out of a certain door, like if you went into Moody Land, you would get the cult boss, even though that doesn't happen when you walk right in, yeah, I put that in there, put that in the video. It intentionally was like showing you pieces of the game, which made the game seem much more strange than it actually was. Like basically every place that you could walk into was like this weird death trap. Like you're gonna walk into the convicts or the Sniper family, or you're gonna walk into this like fucking insane dude in this white robe with the eye painted on his chest in blood. And that painted a really fucking bizarre picture of what the game was like, especially considering like you boot it up like, yeah man, zombies bro, we're just gonna kill some zombies, it's gonna be a cool fucking zombie game, and then you're getting fucking shot with sniper rifles, because I love that. It's hard to explain the mystery that surrounded the game in that time, because like there was a time not that long ago when games were like, every game was shrouded in mystery, because if you couldn't soldier on, like if you couldn't muster the energy to continue the game, it was like a null point. Like you're never going to see what happens after, and you're never really going to know everything about a game. You're never going to really know for sure, because there was always a level of mystique to a game, and that would unravel more as you would play it. But I do distinctly remember there was never a feeling like you knew everything about a game. Like you could just play it. Like I remember playing Devil May Cry 3 as a kid, and it was like, that game was so fucking huge. Like the prospect of that game was so massive that I couldn't wrap my head around like even beating one level. Also because it was too hard. But the concept of that game, like the world that it fostered, like seemed so big. And the same thing was true of Dead Rising, especially when like you can get out of the mall, sort of, like you can drive cars around, and they have the whole underground tunnels. It made the whole thing seem like a labyrinth, and it made it seem huge. Resident Evil 4 is Capcom really had that shit down. Like they were like making the most fucking bizarre, huge games. So in that time there was this mystique around every game, and Dead Rising nailed that better than any other game, like period. There was no game that even came close to touching that, especially if you played the demo before you played the actual game, because the demo it literally paints this just insane picture, and then you're like, what am I gonna do? I can't conquer this game. It's like, it's this massive crazy thing. I don't know, it leaves a weird taste in your mouth, especially if you were playing that at like a younger point, a more impressionable point in your life. It was really scary. Like there's something, I think maybe the concept of zombies has always been scary to a certain degree to me, but it was kind of a new idea that at least it was a new idea for gaming that, like, you know, you're gonna have zombies and you're gonna have people too, but the people are gonna be more fucked up than the zombies. That's like a really classic trope, but that was a new thing for video games in like 2006. That was a whole other thing for video games, you know? Like unless you want to talk about fucking zombies ate my neighbors, like, it was not a cool... I mean, that was definitely the era. I don't know, none of it was really, I mean, it's a Capcom thing, right? Because they had been doing Resident Evil for, like, God knows how long. And that really is kind of the same idea. I guess it's not fair to say that the people are more scary than the zombies, because Resident Evil had been around. Resident Evil was like, the people were kind of partial. You know what I mean? The zombies were the real threat, so... I don't know. Capcom had their bag together when it came to doing their zombie shit, though. I think that Rising was a really open interpretation of what that kind of scenario could be like. Because Resident Evil 4 was like 2004, I think. It definitely predates Dead Rising. Resident Evil 4 had a specific kind of vibe to it, and it's the same thing is kind of true. I don't know, maybe it was a departure, I think, for the Resident Evil series to approach zombies in that way, because it's not like a zombie, you know, it's basically every man against one, and then there's also these weird antagonists that just show up to bother Leon at random points in the game, and that's cool. There's nothing wrong with that, but, you know, that makes for, like, a good action game. But when you're fostering, like, a good survival horror experience, it's not even, like, it's just anxiety. Like, Dead Rising is an anxiety simulator from top to bottom. The whole thing is just fucking anxiety. Like, I couldn't be more happy that there was that it got ported. You know what I mean? That it's on PS4 and it's on PC now, and everything got sorted out, because there was like 10 years where everyone really thought that there was never going to be a PC port of Dead Rising, and like people were like trying to do it themselves and shit. So like the fact that it was revitalized in that way is like massive. However, when you played on Xbox, you only had one save per hard drive, right? They didn't make memory cards for the 360, right? It was all, you would just buy the fucking fat HDD that would just slap on the top of it. But you only had one save, so you couldn't fuck around. You really couldn't fuck around. Like, unless you were gonna go buy like a USB and format it for your Xbox, like, and save on that, you couldn't. And then even then, you had two fucking saves. So, good luck. You know what I mean? Enjoy that. So when you're dealing with one save at a time, and, you know, you're managing lobotomized survivors, and you're working on a time limit, and you really don't even know, like, you're just going from one thing to the next, like, you really don't even know what your overall objective is, don't die. But then it becomes a little bit more complicated when you have a guy trying to, like, fucking blow the whole place up, which is good. And that's good drama. So it's like an anxiety experience, you know what I mean? Like, I guess that's kind of the idea of survival horror, right? Like, with tank controls. But Dead Rising didn't need tank controls. It actually had they're gonna give you really precise movement. Other than that stupid shit where if you can change it in the settings, but it would aim based on where your player was instead of where your camera was. 100% they did that. Like, there's no way that anyone thinks that that's intuitive, right? Like, that is totally designed to be a pain in the ass. That's the only thing that makes any sense, right? No, I wanted to mention, so during the mystique, the era of the mystique of video games, you know what I mean? There was no internet, so you couldn't really see what was going on in a game, period. Like, even if you had, like, the Prema guide or something, like, you had an understanding, but it was mostly that stuff that you could kind of figure out on your own anyway. But more importantly, YouTube was very different in those days. So probably, like, I guess, like, 2010, there was maybe 10 people, maybe 15 people, and that's generous. There was 10 interesting people that would do Let's Plays, or that had done a Let's Play of Dead Rising. I don't know how much, I must have spent a pretty considerable amount of time watching every single one of them, because it was like too interesting of it. Like, I wanted to see how other people would react. It really was it really was the beginning of like, you see how Let's Plays got so big. But, like, I was so fascinated with this fucking game that I would watch the 10 people on the only 10 people on the internet talking about or playing this game, and that was all the information that you could, like, other than a forum, which, you know what I mean, like, other than going on a forum, that was the only information that you could get. That's the only real like visual you could see someone playing the game, other than like watching your friend play it. That was all you could get. That's the only information you could really get about the game. You could just read, you know what I mean? You get on a forum and you're like, it's people talking about whether or not you can unlock Luigi in Super Mario 64 if you get all the stars. That's what the internet was. There was no real information. It was all just bizarre nonsense. Okay, that's it. That's done. Done with that. Talk about the aesthetic. Let's talk about the aesthetic of Dead Rising. I want to talk about, first of all, I've talked about this with friends, and they seem to concur. Capcom had something figured out. I mean, and this totally might be a byproduct of, because they had their own proprietary engine, so maybe they just didn't bother, maybe they just didn't spend a lot of time coding shaders and things like that, because, yeah, who gives a shit? It's like, wasn't popular back then. Probably much harder to do hardware-wise. Post-processing was a pain in the ass. So they just kept it simple, like decent res textures, because, you know, consoles were getting to that point at post PS2 era, like we're gonna have just decent res. I'm not sure what the actual res on them was, but they looked okay, and they look fine now. I see people complain like about Resident Evil 4, like the HD project and stuff. Like people want to upgrade Resident Evil 4. I think Resident Evil 4 looks good, but like I like that. I like the smudgy, like when the textures fucking run like watercolor. I think that's a nice aesthetic. But Capcom had this style of, let's just decent textures, you know what I mean? Good, decent poly models. For the time, it was incredible. Everything looked good. You know, no crazy shaders, some depth of field, a little bit of motion blur. We're not going to get crazy with the post-processing. And that fostered a system where when you bring that into HD, and like when they reported Dead Rising for the 10th year anniversary, and you're playing it in 1080p or 4K or whatever, and this is the same thing is true of Devil May Cry 4, but I'm not sure what changes they made for the special edition, but both of those games look really fucking good when you play them in 1080p or 4K or whatever. Mainly just because like the models look good and the textures are okay. They look pretty good. So I don't know, they just age right. You know what I mean? Like if you go back and look at like Gears of War or like other games, and you know what I mean, this was early. This was like when the 360 just shipped. I don't know if Dead Rising was a launch title or not, or if it was supposed to be and then it took a little bit of time, but for being a game from like 2006, there is a lot of games from 2006 that do not look good. But I don't know, Capcom just had that leg up of having their own engine where they could just kind of mess with things from a top-down perspective, and I don't know, man, it fostered a good. Even Resident Evil 5 doesn't look that bad now. Like people complain about the color grading, but like like Chris looks really good in that game. Like Sheva looks good in that game. The models are really fucking nice. That was another like really early 360 title. Capcom was just crushing it, man. Like they were making good moves. So it has that leg up, aesthetically speaking, with the textures and no really stupid post-processing that weighs anything down. But let's talk about the literal aesthetic of like the UI and things like that. Like everything is kind of this newsroom, has this sheen to it, which is like very reminiscent of that time. I feel like that was like, because the news is like whatever now, and also you know what I mean, everything copies like this minimalistic style. Everything is this like perpetual loop of how minimal can we make our designs and things like that. But 2000s news, like there was no UI that looked like that. Like that was really coming into its own, like with the globe effects and things like that. So like the replication of that in the UI for Dead Rising is really spot on. And I don't know, it's just unlike any. It's like a really bizarre. Like I get it, Frank's a journalist. We're gonna make the news UI. The loading screens are like in the red room, you know, developing the photographs. That's really fucking cool. That's a great design choice. But at the same time, it's so weird. Like it's a game about zombies. It's a bizarre. I guess it kind of it mixes the two faculties of like, let's consider the reality of the situation, and then also like, you know, wow, this is like a news story that's being ran. Like you're playing what will in the future be like a historic piece of journalism or whatever. But I don't know. I find that hard to articulate. But that was a very specific time for, you know, news in general. I mean, the news was God then. You know, pre the internet being what it was. Like that was a really important piece of like when some big shit went down, it was on the news. Maybe that's a minor detail. But it did come out really clean. It's a nice it's like a weird, it's kind of you know, like when you have this nice news backdrop and like what's really happening is like you're hitting zombies in the head with bowling balls. It's like a weird where like people are getting eaten. It's like a weird it's like a very bastardized version. It's like a very dark version of what would normally be like a normal. There's something, I'm telling you, there's something psychological about that. There has to be. I do think the game's weird anti-capitalist subtext is it's kind of half-hearted. You know what I mean? They didn't really go all the way with that. It's just like this. It's literally like it's like one time. Like Carlito in the beginning of the game is literally like, yeah, they're at the mall. It's almost like they're already dead because they're shopping. And then that's it. That's all you really get. I think the way that the story plays out with Carlito being the antagonist is like it's kind of mature. I don't know. It's not what I would expect from a game like that. It is a very mature take on, you know, the nature of protagonists and antagonists. And it's almost like Frank is not the protagonist. I mean, I guess he is because he saves everyone in the end. But like for most of that game, he's just a guy with a camera. Like he just walks around. No one wants to help him. Brad doesn't want to work with him. The game approaches like the hero story in a really light way. You know what I mean? Like it starts off hard with like Frank being on the helicopter. He's talking himself up. He's talking mad shit. He's gonna run a big game. And then he breaks his legs when he falls on the helicopter. And then he just like fucks around for at least the first half of the game. And anytime some real shit goes down, he has nothing to do with it. And he's usually late. He's there just in time to take a picture and then bother everyone and then leave again. I don't know, man. The story is really badass. Like the story just fucking comes out of nowhere. Like it's like it literally starts like 60 miles an hour and continues to ramp up speed throughout the entire game. It never slows down at any point. It's always increasing in speed up until the point where Frank literally is about to die. Like he's about to become a zombie despite all of your work and everything that you've done. Like everything just fucking falls apart. It's an insane, like the story is insane. I really don't know how. That's hard. Like, you can't pitch a game like that. You know what I mean? Like, it's ridiculously hard the whole time. And then you fail miserably, like, 3 times. Like, basically the whole game you're failing miserably. And then you're gonna walk. You're gonna walk through a tunnel, shoulder to shoulder with zombies. And by the way, it's an escort mission. So you have to deal with that. Because we know how much you loved it in Resident Evil 4. We're doing it again. Because we're good developers. We're good designers. And then, I don't know if it's fair to call the Brock fight hard or not. But you're going to have to do a fight with no weapons. So you better be max level. Because you need the backflip kick. I think that you unlock that at like 42. Level 42. So hopefully you did your homework. Because fuck you. And that's basically the whole game. That is the whole game. Hope you did your homework because fuck you. A Dead Rising story. It's really, Dead Rising is the most fun, not fun game ever made, I think. And that's true. Ever made. Like, nothing really comes close to that. There's no game where you can, like, skateboard and throw bowling balls and just go crazy and have fun. And then also, if you even make an attempt, like, okay, yeah, there's a survivor here. I'll save this guy because he's right here. He's close. It'll be cool. we'll try to save him. You get like 10 steps. Good luck. Have fun. It's just it's an extremely unrewarding game. And it's not even like it's not designed traditionally like a hard game either, you know what I mean? Like, well, difficulty in games previous to stuff like Dark Souls was very different. Like, difficulty literally just meant make it impossible, and if you're like a masochist, you'll beat it. But then, you know, real challenge in games came along and they're like, okay, well, this is better, I guess. It's not rewarding at all, you know what I mean? Like, you're gonna fucking stub your toe like every 10 steps. It's very reminiscent of when you sprint in Silent Hill 2 on the hardest action difficulty and you run into the wall. That's kind of what all of Dead Rising is like, but you can't turn it off. You can't control it. It's just running into the wall for like, how long is that game? Like 10 hours or something? It's like running into the wall for 10 hours. A Dead Rising story. Why wouldn't you play it? Why wouldn't you play it? It used to be $60 on launch. I think $60 to run into the wall and stub your toe. Cough it up, man. And I don't even mean that it's not fun in a good way. Like, I literally like the game is hard and unrewarding in really stupid ways, but the game is also really fun and instantly gratifying in a lot of other ways. Like running around and like having all these stupid outfits to put on, or like finding a katana on the roof, you know, stupid stuff, finding an Uzi in the palm tree or whatever. Like, games, so few games, at least now, and maybe even back then too, because there was just, people didn't have the budget to fuck with games that level, you know what I mean? Like, so few games had cool little things, and it's literally a sandbox game full of tons of cool little things, and that's like an unparalleled experience. Like, there are so few other games that really came close to like fostering that same level of like, have fun, dude. There's a bowling ball, there's a hockey stick, you can actually hit hockey pucks. Like, there's a great example of that is there's a bike in one area of the game, huge map, one bike, had to program all of the physics for the bike to make that functional, and I'm sure that was a decent amount of work. But one bike, you know, you can get a skateboard, you can get a magazine that lets you kickflip on the skateboard. That's the shit. That's a good fucking game. That's a dope ass game. Yeah, I just don't know if there's anything that can really touch that. And then, you know, even the hiccups of the game kind of they all seem to smooth themselves out when you just fucking don't put too much thought in it. You just enjoy it. But I guess that's true of every game. This probably sucks so bad. I'm gonna delete this. I'm also probably gonna talk about Dead Rising 2 as well, because that game is incredible and I can't stop thinking about it. So maybe I'll talk about Dead Rising 2 next.